unfortunately, coronavirus still comes into it, but a pause for thought, really. I started Hope and Aid Direct in 1999, having been out to Croatia and Bosnia with Mike. We now have these 3 trucks that you can see on the screen, our big rig, as we call it, on the right, plus the 2 smaller 7.5-ton trucks, but the big rig is one of the biggest you can get on the road. We used to go out when I was with Mike to Croatia and then Bosnia, and we would distribute goods. As you can see, there's a building here in the background that's pretty much destroyed, and we'd go out to a particular location with interpreters and distribute off the back of the trucks. But we didn't only do that. You'll see here that there's Mike in the middle there, or on the left. We're sitting with a family, the Petrovic family, a grandmother with about 5 children, and their living conditions were so bad that we decided we needed to do something about it, and we went back and we carried on our distributions. But I sent Mike, I asked Mike to go back all the way over to Zagreb and pick up what he could. And when he came back, we took everything out of the house, and we used the only paint that we had. Mike had the forethought to take out from England about 3 cans of blue paint, and it's all we had, so we painted it. You can even see the chair on the right there that's blue painted. We called it Barrett blue paint, and we painted the house for them, and they were extremely pleased. But we went down into Bosnia, and at that time everything was destroyed, including the bridges, and the only way to get through to Bosnia from Croatia was across a pontoon bridge built by the army. Unfortunately, this was on a river that was tidal, so what goes up must come down, and the bridge went down quite a long way, as we found out when we tried to cross it, because we got down the slope with the first truck. The first one was mine, and discovered that we grounded at the back end of the truck. There's a bar that's a protective bar at the back of the truck, but unfortunately the bar hit the concrete. The front wheel was on the pontoon bridge and the back wheels were suspended in midair, and the army who were managing the bridge across from Croatia to Bosnia were not overly happy about it, and we had to spend quite a bit of time working out how to get off there. And the only way we could do it was to jack up the back of the truck, put bricks and planks underneath the wheels, and eventually we managed to free it. But that was only the part of the problem, because we had to get over the other side. I literally rammed it up the slope the other side, and then Mike, as you can see, Mike is sitting here in the you can see he's sitting there in the cab look. He was then in the position of having to do the same thing, and by this time we'd got boards across the gap, and he was able to get on the pontoon bridge. But that's what we used to do. Between that time and 2015, what we spent most of our time doing was going out to Kosovo after the war there. We were out there between 2000 and 2015, and we generally did about 2 trucks of humanitarian aid each year. Sometimes we had 10 or 12 trucks on the road. Most of them were 7.5 tonners, but we used to own 2 40-ton Arctics, and we were helping the people there. But in October 2015, we all came back from Kosovo, and we saw the photographs of the young lad who had washed up on the beaches of Lesvos in Greece. 2 days after getting back, I decided that I needed to go out there and see what was going on, and that's the site that confronted me on the Macedonian-Serbian border. It was literally thousands of people who were just making their way across fields and up to the points where they were crossing the, by at that stage, open borders. Those borders are now not open, but I went on from there. I flew out to the northern part of Macedonia. I knew somebody in the UN who I met in the north, and then I went down to the southern border and saw the same things happening. And then and this photograph here, you can see one of these two chaps carrying their entire world's possessions in a black sack strung on a stick, really. But at that stage, there were buses that were busing people from one side of the country to the other. People were getting taxis. Of course, all that changed when the borders across Europe started to be closed to the refugees. But I flew from southern Macedonia out to the island of Lesvos. So I arrived in the dark. I drove in a hire car to the northern part of the island, came down to breakfast the following morning, and was sitting in a little cafeteria within the hotel, got chatting to somebody who suddenly said, "We've got to go, there's a boat arriving." I went down to the beach, following them in the hire car that I had. The beach was just at the back of the hotel. And in the first hour on the beach, 6 boats arrived full of refugees in all states of despair, not really, completely traumatized, some of them, not really knowing why they were there or how they got there, and where they were going to go from there. And I don't know whether you've all seen they call it the life jacket mountain, but it's actually a misnomer. These are not life jackets, most of them. They're actually buoyancy aids, and in fact they're not buoyancy aids because most of them are fake. They're made in largely in Turkey and in other countries further east, sold as life jackets, and actually some of them are filled with straw, some of them are filled with polystyrene, and there are literally hundreds of tons of these life jackets now in different dumps on the various islands in the Mediterranean. And that's how some of the children are given a buoyancy support of some sort to travel across the Mediterranean from Turkey to the islands. It's not something that I would put my children in. I'm sure it's not something you'd put your children in. I think that we have a catastrophe on our hands here, not just a crisis, and I think this is global. 65 million people have been forcibly displaced worldwide. 22.5 million refugees, more than half of them are under the age of 18. 10 million stateless people. I didn't know what a stateless person was until I met somebody who was from Kuwait at the jungle in Calais, and he was with a few friends from Kuwait. And I said to him, when he said he was where he was from, I said, "Why are you here from Kuwait? Kuwait is a rich country." He said, "Well, I'm stateless." I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I don't have a passport, and my parents didn't have a passport, and their parents before them didn't have a passport." And that's just something that stuck in my mind, really, because I've never really thought about statelessness before, but we now have it in our millions. 33,972 people a day forced to flee conflict or persecution. Turkey is hosting, or was hosting, 2.5 million refugees. Lebanon hosting 1.1 million refugees. The UK hosting 117,000 refugees. The UK agreed to accept 20,000 from the Middle Eastern camps. Lord Dubs managed to persuade the government to accept 3,000 children, and the government decided, no, we'll accept 350, and then reneged on that 350. That's not thousands, that's not million, that's 350. which sticks in my throat. In January 16, I decided that we had to take a convoy out to Lesvos. Wasn't a particularly auspicious start, because we broke down. That's literally 100 yards from my house. We actually broke down in the high street in Ingatestone, and for 2 hours we had the best managed traffic flow past the truck that we'd had in Ingatestone at all. But we did get going, and as usual, Mike, you'll remember the greasy spoon fry ups that I always do on the truck for the crew. This was us doing. We had a fry up which we'd cooked in the truck, and it was in the snow, but it was sunny and it was very pleasant. But we got out to Kavala in northern Greece, and where we were going to get on the ferry with the trucks, and this was the site of the refugees who were then flooding through from Turkey to Greece, to the islands, and then this was the boat that had arrived from Lesvos to disembark all of those refugees that were able to get off the island. That's typical of the sort of truck full of aid that we would take. So just to sort of give you a rough idea, over here you can see these blue pallets are pallets of pasta. I can buy pasta from, it's a little anecdote, everybody's desperate for pasta at the moment, the shops are short of it. There are 2 main manufacturers of pasta outside Italy. I wonder if anybody knows where they might be. Well, I can tell you, one of them is in Norwich, and they're the people that we get our pasta from. And the pasta that I buy from them is usually end of line pasta or something like that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's long dated. I pay £120 a pallet for pasta, which is a phenomenal price. Then we've got some pallet collars that contain all sorts of different things potentially. But you can see we have banana boxes. Those are our preferred method of packing things that the general public give us. But we much prefer to receive corporate goods that we get as surpluses, basically. So I'd gone back to the islands to take the aid, and immediately went down along the beach, and there was you'll see me here with the red hat on. Another boat came in, and the chap who's standing here, Steve, he's one of my co-trustees. He's currently out in Samos and stuck out there, but he and I were on the beach, and as you can see, people are coming in all states of despair, really. And in those circumstances, it's very difficult to know what to do, and very often it's just a question of doing that. This was a man who was I was giving a hug to, but he was in tears because he had just realised what he'd put his family through, just arrived, and all he needed was a hug. He just needed someone to say, look, we do care. There's one of the boats. I call it a boat advisedly. A lot of these rafts are, again, not properly made. They're not properly, they have boards along the bottom, and the boards are supposed to be hooked together or tied together, but they're not. The motors on the boats are very, very poor and often fail. And as soon as the boats arrive, one of the first things that the volunteer teams do is puncture them so that the traffickers can't take them back to Turkey to get more people. And that's what was happening. But then the traffickers got wise to that, so they started to split the families up. They would keep one member of the family in Turkey and make the other take the boat to Lesvos, and very often at gunpoint, and always leaving their bags and their possessions on the shore in Turkey. And honestly, these are true stories, I can promise you. So there we were. This boat had just come in, and it's all hands to the pumps really. They're wet, they're cold, they've got children that are crying, they've got disabled people, elderly people. They just need as much help as they can get, really. The International Office for Migration produces these stats. Sea arrivals in the Mediterranean 2015, just over 1 million, 3,771 people dead or missing from trying to cross the Mediterranean. 2016, dead or missing 5,096. 2017, dead or missing 3,139. 2018 came down a little bit. The numbers of arrivals, as you can see, have come down quite a lot. The dead or missing numbers have not, proportionately. 2019, 1,283 people died or missing trying to cross the Mediterranean. So, and the sea arrivals, 110,000 people. So anybody that tells you that people are not still trying to make the crossing from Turkey, they either don't know or they're not telling the truth. The people who are coming are desperate and are continuing to make that journey. This is the camp, the refuge. This is the reception centre stroke detention centre that you've all heard about probably on the news. This is Moria refugee camp on the island of Lesvos. This is the official part. It was originally built as a prison, and it certainly feels like a prison, but this is where the refugees are taken when they arrive in Lesvos for registration. The lucky ones, the lucky refugees, are able to stay in a tent in different camps on mainland Greece. This was taken in mainland Greece when a lot of the refugees arriving were being processed and then being allowed to go to the mainland. That's now stopped. The Greek government decided in its wisdom in February to stop the asylum process for a month. But maybe I'll come back to that. But these refugees here are the lucky ones. They're in a nice tent, in a nice warehouse, nice clean floors. But that's what most of the refugees are living in. That's not a clean warehouse. They're not particularly nice tents, and it certainly is not a clean floor. And those of you with children or grandchildren like me, it's pretty unbearable to see all the children and think about our own grandchildren, really. I have 3. This is, again, you can see in the top left-hand side of the screen, that's the part of the Moria camp in Lesvos. The tents outside are because the camp has capacity for, or the camps in Lesvos have capacity for 3,000 people. The actual numbers of refugees in Lesvos now are over 20,000 people. And the rest of those people are sleeping in tents like this if they're lucky, and they're sleeping under plastic sheeting in the olive groves, those that are not. But we went and were prepared. We did. This is Bev, my wife, doing some face painting. The children everywhere are amazingly resilient, but they still love to have their faces painted, and there's always a queue of them waiting to have something done. You don't have to be an expert face painter just to amuse the children with something. And this is Tony, one of our volunteers in the middle there. He's playing with coins on his elbows, which he's throwing up in the air to the delight of the children. This is a camp that's in the, it's actually on Mount Olympus in Greece, right in the middle of, it literally is right in the middle of nowhere. The expression "out of sight, out of mind" came to me when we were visiting, but after we took them literally half a truckload of brand new shoes that we got from Adidas. as a donation. And we walked around the camp, and you can see here, this lady's, she's fashioned a fire outside her tent. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, fires occur because they're all too close, but she'd fashioned a fire with a grill, and I'm not quite sure what she's cooking there, but we were having a nice chat with her. But then in September 16, we took a truck of aid to Calais. This is the jungle in Calais before it was totally destroyed by the French police. We walked right the way through the jungle. Didn't feel unsafe anywhere at all. Completely safe, and in fact, a lot of the people there, the entrepreneurial people there, set up their own little sort of cafes and things, and invited us in, and were very pleased to see us as we walked through. We got to the far end, and these were the Corimex buildings. Mike, you'll remember the Corimex buildings from the metal factory, probably in Bosnia. But these are the Corimex buildings that they've stacked one on top of the other. And again, these were for the lucky ones. But they've all been destroyed or removed now, and there are still probably over 1,000 refugees with children and families sleeping in the hedgerows and in the forests in Calais. There's a wonderful group called the Refugee Community Kitchen, staffed entirely by volunteers and completely run through through donations from the public. They've produced over 1,000 meals a day for 3 years and have only just had to close because of coronavirus. But the refugees are still there and still need support. And I took this photograph. I thought this one was very poignant. This chap just sitting on a stone, looking at the wall, and you can only really imagine what he must have been thinking. In January 17, I took a convoy of trucks out to Thessalonica and then on to Lesvos. In Lesvos, this was a squat that we went to. People were living inside in the most appalling conditions. There's a few of the guys that were inside. You can see they've got tents on top of pallets. And I'll warn you now, if you're a bit squeamish, you may wish to close your eyes and turn away. But people in the winter months come in all sorts of dreadful conditions and with frostbite. This is a chap who's got frostbitten toes and his foot. And this is somebody's hand that is frostbitten. Won't dwell on that. In July 17, I went to I flew out there and again decided we had to do something, and we went to what was called the barracks in Belgrade. Over 1,000, in this case mainly men, but there were some children as well, from Afghanistan and Iraq, I believe, mainly. One or two from Syria, sleeping in what used to be the old railway sidings, literally within about 200 yards of the main central railway station slap bang in the middle of Belgrade. And these were the conditions they were sleeping and living in. Utter filth. Quite incredible. And a group called No Names Kitchen, again, a wonderful group of volunteers, every single day while they were there, came along with a hot meal and hot food. And here you can see them all queuing to collect their food. In July 17, we went to northwest Serbia to a place called Shid, or SID, but Shid. And there was a group out there in Belgrade that named themselves Belgrade, play on words, and we took out to them lots and lots of food and various other things. And this is the kitchen where they were cooking the meals that they were giving out in the previous photograph. And then we went to a refugee camp right smack on the border between Serbia and Croatia. And this is one of two rub hall tents you can see that there's absolutely no privacy. There are families in the, I'll show you with the pointer here. So in there, that's the space for one family, and in there, that's the space for another family. And sleeping on top, you've got more people all together with no privacy at all. They have 5 outside toilets, which you genuinely would not want to put your animals into. And a wonderful group that I've come across called Watershed, who spend their entire time, all volunteers, going between one camp and another to try and improve the sanitary conditions, putting in sinks, trying to make the toilets better, and doing what they can. But you can see here, there's no privacy whatsoever. They go outside, and again, volunteer groups turn up in the late afternoon with generators so they can all charge their phones and give them a hot meal when they can. And that's what they're doing here, they're having a meal. And then in November 17, we went back to Šid, and we went to the Weserai, which is the Serbian for laundry. We set up a laundry. I managed to, I have a contact, I can acquire refurbished commercial washing machines and drying machines that are normally about £6,000 each. I can buy those for about £1,000, and we have so far set up a complete laundry in Kosovo, now one in Serbia. That was actually moved, but the Weserai is the laundry. And we've also taken machines out to Lesvos, and we've been asked to take some to Samos. But we went out there. These are 2 of our volunteers. The chap on the left actually works for DFID. But you can see our machines. The one on the right there particularly is the drying machine, and the 2 back ones, a lovely lady called Denise, a real Essex girl who spent her entire time just doing the washing and loved every minute of it. We took out lots of sleeping bags and sleeping mats, about 300 of each. And we gave those out, and we gave them out to the people here that were sleeping rough, completely rough, out in the open, very close to the refugee camp. And here they are again, just having some food that we've just given out to them, or that's just been given out. In January 18, we went back to Lesvos and then on to the island of Chios. We went out in the winter, so we had snow to deal with, but the main roads are pretty clear and pretty well managed in that respect. Here's some of the refugees with their bags, all their possessions in the world, and we were following them down the road. That's, again, some of the pasta that we've unloaded, and in this case we had some rice, but that's the sort of amount that we try to give to each location. And this here is a kitchen in, it's a shack, isn't it? But it's the kitchen in a wonderful place called One Happy Family. The building behind it is an old warehouse, but they've converted it. They've got seats and chairs and a cafe inside. And in this kitchen outside, there's one man from somewhere in Egypt, I think, who's cooking in great big vats and knocking out something like 500 or 600 meals a day. And here's the children that were waiting for the food that he'd just been preparing. But one of the volunteers that I've met, this chap on the right called Dav, actually a traveller in the UK, an amazing guy, has completely given up his life to help people out in all the refugees all the way across Europe. In fact, we gave him one of our 7.5 ton trucks was in need of some repairs. Being a traveller, he knew people that he could get it done for very little. It was more economical for us to give it to him, and he's using that. He's converted it into his travelling house, and he produced the garden here, which is growing all the vegetables at One Happy Family, where they have over 1,000 refugees come in every day to for somewhere to spend some time together, to have a cup of tea and to get away from the camps. In September 19 last year, I went out to the island of Samos to see what the situation was there, and it was absolutely shocking. Samos, here's the lovely Greek island bay of Samos. Looks quite delightful. And up on the mountain side, just there, that bit there is the main refugee camp called Vathi. The whole town is the town of Vathi. That's the main camp. This bit over on the right here is the sprawling tents that I saw in September 19. On Samos, the camp capacity, this camp capacity here, is 648. In that space there are another 7,300 refugees. And they're living in almost worse conditions than Lesvos and Chios, because as you can see, it's right on the mountainside. And this is me in the middle walking through the camp, and you can see it goes down on the one side towards the bay, and then up on the right hand side. But this is, again, you can see in the background, this is the main camp, 648 capacity, and people outside, youngsters playing, and you've got the tents and everything else on the right. And there's one chap with his family and in his tent with another tent next door, and UNHCR sheeting covering the top of it. Children the world over love teddy bears. I'm not quite sure where we got that one because it's rather enormous, but that little child was loving it. UNHCR, I'll go back to that one. UNHCR are and the big agencies are thoroughly conspicuous by their absence, apart from lots and lots of UNHCR sheeting, which you'll find everywhere. But most of the people are living in tents. Some are living like this. And this one I thought was interesting. Because it's on a mountainside, they have to be extremely ingenious about how they create a flat slope to put their tent on. This tent, which is at best you would probably put 2 people in it if you were from the UK. They are sleeping 6 people in that tent, and they've propped it up on stones, quite literally, at one end. It's on the ground at the other. There's a tree you can't see, but just behind it. And they've got ropes to the tree, to the side and to the back to hold it in place. And I got chatting to this chap, and he said that they laugh when somebody rolls out at night. How they can maintain their composure and their dignity, I have no idea. I thought I'd just give you some statistics quickly. 20,045 refugees and asylum seekers on Lesvos as at a few days ago. 78% of those are from Afghanistan, 8% from Syria, 4% from Somalia. 23% are ladies and 41%, that's 8,218 children. 7 out of 10 of those, 5,753 children, are under the age of 12, and 690 of them are orphaned or unaccompanied or separated, and mainly from Afghanistan. I'll just bring you back to the UK government's reneging on the agreement to take 350 refugees, children. 690 just on Lesvos. I'm not even touching Chios or Samos or Leros or Kos or Teros or any of the other islands, all of which are receiving refugees. That's a photograph I took in Samos. That shows you the distance on the far shore to Turkey. It's no more than about maximum 2 kilometers. and you could see why some people swim or try to swim. I'm going to show that one. This is not a photograph I put together. I saw this in Facebook, but I really believe that the world has got an absolute catastrophe on its hands, and I believe that our politicians are unfortunately not doing what they should be doing to look after people. I believe passionately that we all live on the same planet and we need to look after each other. These are genuine photographs. The Greece photograph is a genuine photograph, and there are more rich people now in the world than there have ever been. Over 50 armed conflicts around the world. We're suffering from climate change, not to mention coronavirus, of course. The world is on the move. Our leaders, however, are building walls and want to make their countries great. They are blocking access to humanitarian organisations in a number of these countries. The UNHCR have made representations but are ignored. In the Yemen, 10 million people are one step from famine, and yet the country is bombed by Saudi Arabia, who cynically provide the greatest financial help to the UN from any single member state. It leaves me almost speechless. I took these two shots from Facebook recently. I don't know whether you're Facebook users, but the left-hand photograph shows a group of men and women dressed in Nazi uniform in a fete, if you like, dressed up to look like Nazis, and in a carnival float it was. And the article, or the person who makes the comment, cannot understand why it's being allowed, and I have to say I couldn't agree more. And the photograph on the right is just one of a million photographs of the refugees walking and trying to get to safety. Since January 2020, all the islands that we go to, that's Lesbos, Chios and Samos, have had their main aid warehouses torched by neo-Nazi thugs who infiltrated the islands mainly from Germany. Many of the volunteers were attacked and their cars were damaged. There were riots between the locals and riot police. On one day, the Greek government sent their own police dressed fully in riot gear. They marched them off the boat. There's video footage of it. There's 100 or so Greek riot police coming off with batons and shields and everything else to go to a site where the authorities wanted to build a new detention centre, a closed detention centre, quotes unquotes, for the refugees. And the local Greeks objected, and there was rioting because they don't want another closed detention centre there, because they feel that the islands have already been turned into prisons. And 24 hours later, those riot police returned to the mainland Greece. 24 hours after that, Erdogan in Turkey decided that he'd had enough. He was already fighting with his troops just inside Syria, and he threatened to open the borders to Greece. Actually, what he did was he opened the Turkish side of the border, but not the Greek side of the border. And the Greek authorities and the army then started to fire tear gas at the refugees who were caught in no man's land, including the children. And that has been happening on the islands and on the borders. Unbelievable, really. Most of the NGOs have had to retreat or leave the islands, leaving the refugees to fend for themselves. The Eastern European borders have now all been closed to refugees. The number of volunteers who are left is literally just handfuls. and particularly medical volunteers. There's a medical team that had to vacate Moria camp, and there's literally half a dozen people. I had an appeal from a lady the other day saying they were desperate for anything medical. So we're doing our best to collect what we can, and we'll take it as soon as we can. They've forced the refugee food kitchens on the islands to close, and sanitation, well, I've already described, it's dangerous. Every day, the refugees have to queue for 2 to 3 hours for food, because of the fact there's no other food supplies now. That food is provided by the army. It is extremely poor. Often there's mold in it, it's cold, and it's exceptionally basic, has almost no nutritional value whatsoever. And then along came coronavirus, and everything got locked down. One of my co-trustees, Steve, is out in Samos. He has to seek written permission. They have to seek written permission to go out and do any aid distribution with the refugees. They can self-certificate. Unlike us here, they still have to have a certificate with them if they go to the shops to buy food, and they are allowed to do that, but they're not allowed to go out on the beaches or anything like that at all. They're completely confined. And if you can compare that to the refugees who are now having to confine themselves to their tents. So you can imagine a family of 5 or 6 with children confined to a small tent. I can't imagine what it's like. I can't get my head around it. All the EU borders are now closed. Apparently commercial traffic is being allowed across the borders, but I just thought I'd put that statistic there for you. I'm trying to work out whether we can send more convoys out to Greece. I do know that a few weeks ago there was a 40-kilometre queue of vehicles trying to cross between Austria and Hungary. Even if we were allowed, there are 8 countries that we need to cross. There's 2 sides to every border, and we've got to go both ways. That's 32 passport and papers checks potentially to get now to the Greek islands and back again, if we can do it. So what have we been doing in the meantime? Well, one of the aid groups out in Lesvos that we work with, a wonderful group called Attica Human Support. They're normally running the warehouse and taking all our aid, and then people go to them and they distribute it. But they've also acquired an ex-RNLI life rib here. It's a Nomad, quite well equipped already, but they desperately needed additional radar equipment and navigation equipment. We have spent or sent to them €5,200, about £4,800, and they have just bought this Raymarine radar and navigation equipment, and you can see there on the right that it's being fitted. It was being fitted a few days ago, and as soon as they can get that out onto the water, they've officially registered and officially licensed as part of the SAR, search and rescue for the island, and we can't wait. I can't wait for them to get out there and start saving some of those lives. And pretty much to finish with, last week, Bev and I can't sit here and do nothing. I offered the use of our vehicles, our 40-ton Arctic and 2 7.5-tonners, to the government to help with the coronavirus logistics. I've had acknowledgement but not had anything else from them. I also mentioned it to our local council and to the local Rotary Club Rotary Resilience team in Essex, and one of them got in. He mentioned it to somebody else who got in touch with me, and Bev and I moved 67 30-kilogram rolls of blue cotton material from one factory in North London to another factory in Barking, and this is me moving one of the rolls, really heavy, and they're making scrubs with them for Basildon Hospital right now. And that's my last finishing screen, really. just to sort of pose the question, how could you help us? I'd ask you to spread the word about what we're doing and talk about what you've seen and talk about the situation. Go online, look on Facebook if you're using it. There's lots of stuff on there about what's going on, and show other people, tell other people. We're always very pleased to receive donations and personal donations. You can do that through our website. We've got something going called Sponsor a Pallet. We're getting people sponsoring a pallet at £50 per pallet. We've even got church groups and others sponsoring a truck. Anything from £2,000 to £5,000 is what it costs us to take a truck of humanitarian aid out there. And then I'm trying to target specific aid needs. All the refugees badly need underwear all the time. They arrive on the islands with a pair of underwear, and that's what they have for the entire duration. And some of them are there for a year or even 2 years, relying on handouts. And we're looking for blankets, sleeping bags, and tents. Anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Chaz.
I hope that's been of some interest.
It's been excellent, as always.